All right, guys, we've got a pretty fiery tweet here from Dennis Dodd on the current Big Ten situation. He says, "Be careful what you wish for. It was strongly suggested to me that if UCLA is forced to stay in the Pac-12, which I don't see happening at all, turning down all that money, that seems like it's not going to happen. But common sense move is Big Ten has to fulfill that media rights contract, meaning they would for sure bring in another team with USC if UCLA really does get blocked from going to the Big Ten. It would go get the likes of Oregon and Washington, maybe more, and effectively collapse the Pac-12. So, in my opinion, when it comes down to this situation with UCLA possibly getting blocked, it's not going to happen. The money motivation, just massive. It's not even like you're doubling your money. No, you're tripling your money. You know, I know there were reports that UCLA, if they stayed in the Pac-12, the Pac-12 commissioner was talking about possibly being at around $41 million per team per year. They were saying that was a little bit overestimated. So even with UCLA still in the Pac-12, you're looking probably at around $35 million per year. Of course, if UCLA goes to the Big Ten, that's when you start talking extremely huge numbers. We know Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, the way the games are going this year with the ratings. I don't know if you guys have seen Ohio State, Michigan games this year in this rivalry game, the 2v3 matchup that's happening. The ratings are off the charts. I mean, it is crazy. Ohio State's fan base and Michigan's fan base, it all goes into the overall value of the Big Ten Conference, which is only going to make UCLA and USC more money. But guys, the bigger picture to all of this, and I said this back in the summer, the Big Ten will for sure be creating a West Wing. It is happening. It makes too much sense when you talk about travel and things like that. I understand they have planes and stuff and they can keep travel, but it's just too much of an inconvenience to have just two teams on one side of the country compared to all the other teams kind of cluttered around the middle of the country. So, in my opinion, there will be a West Wing. The most obvious fits, it depends how big the conference gets. Do they go to 20 teams? Do they go to 18 teams? Certainly, Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and California would be the four teams you would be looking at if they do the mega super conference, which would be right around, I think, 20 teams at that point, because they're already going to 16 teams as long as UCLA gets involved and this all gets cleared up, which I think it will, because money's going to be a major factor when you talk about this current situation. So I still expect UCLA and USC together in the Big Ten in due time. And moving on to the Lane Kiffin situation, kind of a weird thing. Lane Kiffin loves to troll on social media, and the whole Auburn Ole Miss thing, who's the better job, I think they're very comparable, and I would say this is probably a positive for Ole Miss, how the situation turned out. Basically, some nobody reporter reported that Lane Kiffin was leaving for Auburn on Friday, and then he refutes it, and it turns into this whole social media thing. But you would think if Lane Kiffin really was leaving for Auburn, he wouldn't be, doing this whole spiel on social media. He would end up looking dumb. So I'm guessing Lane Kiffin, the common thought is he just wants a raise at this point, and he will be getting that from Ole Miss. I gotta say, I'd be pretty pissed off if I was an Ole Miss fan. This dude just dangles himself or gets thrown around at basically every university, it seems like, for different jobs and things like that. So it would be annoying if you're an Ole Miss fan. There's just no stability for your head coach, even if he signs an extension. I mean, we're seeing these head coaches signing 8 or 9 year extensions, and look at Hugh Freeze signing an 8-year extension with Liberty, and he's already being talked about at Auburn as well. I think I do have odds for the next. Yeah, look at that. Jeff Grimes. Could you imagine Auburn? What a dumpster fire. Jeff Grimes. That is a total linear hire for Auburn. Hugh Freeze, I think it's similar. Deion Sanders would be interesting. There's apparently problems with Deion Sanders regarding an academy that he ran. There's some fraud in there or something. Matt Rule, I heard Matt Rule turned somebody down. He doesn't want to coach in 2023. Matt Campbell for Auburn. At this point, if you're Auburn, you would take Matt Campbell, Mike Gundy, and then Mike Leach on there. Right now, Jeff Grimes, another just a real lackluster hire if they go with Jeff Grimes, in my opinion. This is the college football head coach hot seat. You can see some of the head coaches that could get fired next. Neil Brown, another subpar year at West Virginia. Jimbo Fisher listed. Guys, they're not going to fire Jimbo Fisher. And there were actually a few reports what's going to happen with Texas A&M. And I totally predicted it correctly. The boosters are going to force Jimbo Fisher to hire a newer, Joe Brady 2.0 offensive coordinator, and Jimbo's going to have to completely give up being involved in the offense because it's a dinosaur offense. But Jimbo Fisher is Texas A&M. Texas A&M's expectations this year were inflated with a bunch of true freshmen. I said this before the season. True freshmen don't have major impacts, even if you're a 5-star their first year. And everyone made Texas A&M a top 10 team because they signed the greatest recruiting class in history. But guys, they're all true freshmen. And they already did lose Walter Nolan, or you don't know how these things work with the transfer portal. They might actually be able to get Walter Nolan back if they pay him more money. Because that's another thing that was happening with the transfer portal. Kids would enter the transfer portal and then just stay at their current school because they got more money from the booster. So I think Texas A&M is just going to try and keep their team together, and it would be shocking if they fired Jimbo Fisher. But there are reports they're getting an offensive coordinator. They're changing the offense. That's what Texas A&M is going to be doing next year. That's what I think they're going to be doing. His buyout would be $86 million. And if they want to pay that, God bless them, but I don't see that. That's just too big of an ask, in my opinion. This graph is something that you really have to, I'll have to explain this graph because you look at it, it's weird, but it is the expectations versus reality. Basically, the teams to the right are overperforming their preseason expectations. You can see TCU, South Alabama, Duke, UConn. Not surprising. Ohio University, Illinois, Troy. Those are, especially Illinois. I mean, I thought Illinois was going to be a 2-win team. They've been very solid. I think they have 7 wins. Probably could have had 8 in that Michigan game. And then teams that are way underperforming, it's A&M, it's Nebraska. How about a team that doesn't get talked about a lot right now? Oklahoma. Oklahoma had made like 4 playoffs in the span of 5 years. They lose Lincoln Riley, and now they're virtually a 500 team this year. Nobody talks about them. South Florida, really bad this year, underperforming. Northwestern, some people thought Northwestern was going to go to the Big Ten championship game, but it is just something, it reminds us of the teams that, nobody thought TCU was going to be this good. Nobody thought Duke. I mean, Duke was possibly the worst Power 5 team last year if you look at the actual metrics. Now it clearly is Colorado, but Duke with a huge turnaround. And part of that is the ACC is extremely weak. And then you can kind of see the teams performing exactly right where their preseason expectations were. Utah, East Carolina, Buffalo, Indiana, UNLV, Boise State right there as well. So just something interesting to look at there. And then I did have another thing. How about Deion Sanders? This rumor on Deion Sanders in talks with Colorado and South Florida. So the whole Deion Sanders thing, I think he's leaving. I think he said in an interview when College Game Day went to Jackson State, he would look around. So he's already admitting it. Deion Sanders will make the leap to a Power 5 program. There are a lot of Power 5 programs that are extremely desperate. If Deion Sanders can attract the number 1 player in the nation to flip on National Signing Day to Jackson State, Deion Sanders is going to get multiple 5-stars. And teams are going to find that very attractive, even with the lack of experience and things like that. Could Deion Sanders maybe want to take a job like Colorado or South Florida to get some experience and then go for a bigger job? Maybe, but I don't see that personally. So my original thought with Deion was he'd go to FSU, but now FSU has completely turned their program around. They're so good, finishing this year. The only problem with FSU right now, in my opinion, their recruiting still kind of sucks. So, they need to turn that around, and maybe this season, getting into a good bowl, destroying Florida, they're going to finish, 9-3? That's a really good year for them. So when it comes to Deion Sanders, I think it's a bigger program. I've heard his name get thrown around with Nebraska in schools like that, Auburn obviously as well. But to me, Deion Sanders to Auburn does not feel like a good fit. It doesn't feel like a good fit at Nebraska. It feels like with Deion, it has to be a program like FSU, in my opinion, would be a better fit. Unless, of course, he wants to do the thing where he goes to like South Florida for 2 years, gets some more experience, and then goes to possibly a bigger time program. And then the Heisman board. So the Heisman is basically down to two guys at this point, and it's C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams coming out of nowhere to get into this race, but Caleb Williams certainly, he's got the opportunity at home against Notre Dame. We know C.J. Stroud, it's been a little disappointing with C.J., quite frankly. 4 out of the past 5 games, I feel like a little bit underperformed, but if C.J. Stroud throws for 4 or 5 touchdowns against Michigan and Ohio State wins, it's over, and his odds go to minus 10,000. He becomes the instant winner. If C.J. Stroud loses against Michigan, I don't see any way he wins the award. I think it would have to be Caleb Williams. Blake Corum sitting in third. The injury, it's very tough with Blake Corum. It's pretty severe. We'll see if Corum decides to play Michigan. There's definitely going to be strategy that goes into what happens with Blake Corum, but none of us know really how bad the Corum injury is. But if it actually is severe, Michigan might just want to rest him, and then you've got a built-in excuse if you lose to Ohio State and you possibly still make the playoff and say, listen, we missed our best player, we're playing on the road in Columbus, you could make a case that they should still get in. I don't know how bad the Corum injury is. I do know he came back out and had 2 carries in the second half, and then they sat him. So it doesn't seem that horrible, but it does seem like it's down to C.J. Stroud or Caleb Williams. And if C.J. Stroud struggles against Michigan, Caleb Williams has a night game against Notre Dame. It couldn't be more perfect for him, and this would be a total just we haven't seen a Heisman race really like this where nobody wants to take it, and last week it was Drake May, and the week before that it was Blake Corum, and this week it's Caleb Williams. And how about like a few weeks ago as well, Hendon Hooker, he's out of it now, obviously, with the injury. Bo Nix had been talked about. They lost again a few weeks ago. That knocked him out of it, and he also got injured as well. So kind of a weird Heisman this year, maybe a little bit of an underwhelming one. To be honest, I did think C.J. Stroud was going to have better stats than this. I know his stats are good, but you're talking about multiple games where it just seems like against Maryland, 1 passing touchdown. That's very surprising to me. Very surprising. But either way, that's just the updated Heisman board and some other news. And then this other thing I saw, South Carolina scored so many points against Tennessee, they ran out of fireworks. And this is actually true. It's I was watching the game, they scored, they got to a 60 burger on Tennessee, and they ran out of fireworks because they scored so many touchdowns. That is actually a true story, and that is hilarious. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.